I'm very excited that Eureka Entertainment is now releasing its titles in America. They're a British company that's been UK only releases for the longest time, but now they are first two new releases in the US. This is one of them. The other one I'll get to later. This is from 1927, The Cat and the Canary. This was a very influential early Universal horror film, a film that some on the extras on this say sort of set the mold for what would follow in the sound era of Universal horror. This is a silent film with musical accompaniment based on the original musical cue sheets that were given to theaters. So the music that you hear, very nicely orchestrated music on this film, is the same thing that people would have heard basically played by a piano player in silent movie theaters back in its day. Stars Paul, no, it doesn't. Directed by Paul Leni, who did The Man Who Laughs, that famous film that inspired the look of the Joker, and with Laura LaPlante and Creighton Hale. Creighton is a name that kind of just phased out. Lon Chaney Jr.'s first name, by the way, Creighton. So it was remade in 1939 with Bob Hope as a bit more of a comedic tale, and Paulette Goddard, and in 1979 by, erotic filmmaker Radley Metzger remade it with a star-studded cast. And so there are multiple versions of this film has been made over the years, and it inspired other films. There's extras on here that talk about that, how there's the old dark house format was a genre for a long time. This is just one of the earliest examples. So the audio is a score by Robert Israel. As I mentioned, it's DTS HDMA 5.1, or you can just turn the sound off and pretend you're seeing it in a theater that didn't have a piano accompaniment. So really interestingly shot film, but I'll get to that in a moment. So the basic story here is a strange old man dies in his isolated mansion estate, and he has a will that's set to not be opened for 20 years. When it is opened, all the people are summoned who might be heirs to his estate, and the will is read, and the estate is left to the Laura LaPlante character, young female, and the stipulation is that she has to spend the night, or she has to spend a certain amount of time in the castle house, and his physician that he appoints has to go there and make sure she is sane to receive the property, which of course sets in motion nefarious doings to make sure that she will not be deemed sane. So the question becomes, who is this weird hairy clawed hand that keeps reaching out of the shadows for her? Is she going to be deemed sane? Who is the person who's not her, who's behind all this, and who will survive and what will be left of them, basically. So this is a fun film. It's silent films are not an easy sell for a lot of people now. Most modern audiences, if it's in black and white, they don't want to know about it. If it's more than a few years old, they don't want to know about it. So let alone being, sepia tone with color tinting throughout, and just no dialogue might be hard for some people. For me, it's cool. I don't know. Good movie's a good movie. Cinematic technique is something I appreciate. Very interestingly shot. Very artistically shot. A lot of, to me, now I haven't seen the width and breadth of the silent film era. I've seen a good number. They tend to be relatively simply shot. Occasionally, you'll see something interesting in camera technique and lighting and things like that, or editing, but a lot of times they're pretty straightforward. This film has a lot of really interesting things, and this is like a couple years before sound would come in. And it's not always, but oftentimes just really like interesting to look at and stylish, which I always appreciate. The really nice restoration on this, very sharp. I mean, there is film damage and things like that, but it looks like really good on the TV. And it's one of those things too where growing up, silent films were projected at a different speed than sound film. And most of the time when you were watching TV or home video or any kind of use of silent film era material in the sound era, they always played a little bit fast. That made everybody think that everybody moved fast in silent movies for some reason. It was just because they were playing them back at the wrong speed. So it's nice to see video restorations in the last couple decades. The fluidity of movement is correct. It's at the right frame rate. And this Eureka Masters of Cinema collection really treats this stuff with respect. So it's really cool that anybody is rolling the dice on a silent film at this point. There are labels that are dedicated to it, Kino for a long time, and companies like Flicker Alley and things like that are doing really great work with silent films. And there is an audience for it. And the hope is that the audience will grow for this and more people will appreciate all of film history and not just the movies they watched when they were kids. So what do we have on here? I wouldn't say this would necessarily sway silent film fans people who are not silent film fans, I should say. This isn't going to sway people who are like, I can't stand silent films. They're probably still not going to like silent films, but if you're in that gray area, I would say take a shot with this, especially if you like horror movies, because you'll see things in this that wound up getting used much later. And it's cool to see an early Universal horror film and to see the early Universal logo and what that became. And at the end, there's this great moment where it says, you know, it's sort of like a good cast is worth repeating thing. A title card comes up and it says, you know, for those of you who enjoyed this film and would like to know who the players were, we're going to list you that cast again at the end. Because a lot of times older films, and this was true up until like the 50s and early 60s, there really wasn't the end credit crawl that we all know now. There was a lot of credits up front, and at the end it just said the end, and that was it. So it's interesting here to see the cast repeated, and then another title card come up that says, if you enjoyed this film, I would really, or if what I'd like to know your thoughts. And it was signed Carl Laemmle, who ran Universal Pictures. So he basically was saying, what did you think of this? Write to me. We'll make more or less films like this based on what you say. That was kind of cool. So it was, made in the year that talkies debuted. So the first talkie was The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, which wasn't technically sync sound dialogue throughout the film. It was like just one sequence of that film, but 1927 was the year that happened. So this was really film made at the tail end of the silent era. Special features, we have a commentary by Kim Newman and Stephen Jones, commentary by Kevin Lyons and Jonathan Rigby, Mysteries, Mean Dark Corners, a 29-minute featurette about the precursors to this film in the old dark house genre and the career of director Paul Leni, Pamela Hutchinson interview, who is a historian about the film, 13 minutes. Fong Lee interview about, again, discussion of the film, that's 9 minutes. A Very Eccentric Man, 3 minutes. It was an extract from the original play that this Cat and the Canary was based on. Personally, I didn't like this because I thought the voice acting was really bad. Like, it feels like whoever had, I don't want to insult anybody, but it wasn't really professional actors, and it felt like that. A Cat, which is another scene extract from the film with just some stills and people reading from the original play. Again, I thought it was kind of cheesy. Lucky Strike, 53 seconds. It is a Paul Leni Lucky Strike testimonial ad about his directing Cat and the Canary and having fine smoking pleasure while doing that. Again, it's read with someone with a bad fake German accent that I thought was kind of cheesy. I would have appreciated just a still of that or a reproduction in the booklet. So the packaging itself is really nice. That's the cover based on the original poster, front and back, it's slipcase. So as you know, if you sing along, if you know the words, the slipcase slips to reveal the same thing, basically, front and back. We crack it open, very simple, not much on that disc for artwork. But we do have a reproduction of the original poster, which I was appreciating in there, so a reversible sleeve, and a nice sizable booklet about this film. So with stills from the film and a lot of writing. I'm reading it so that you don't have a lot of writing about that. So very good release from Eureka. Very excited to see more in this Masters of Cinema series from Eureka. I didn't love the film, but it was cool to finally be able to see it. I'm sure there are people who will like it a lot more than me, but I'm a fan of film history and of horror history and of early film and of silence and talkies and all that other stuff. So I thought it was really cool. So available now on Blu-ray from Eureka Entertainment, 1927's The Cat and the Canary.